I'm traumatized from my husband showing up on a date with his boss. I feel like absolute *T. Hey Reddit, long-time lurker, first-time poster here. Posting because I need some advice on what to do. I cheated on my husband and he said he had forgiven me, but then showed up at our date with his boss. My name is Ashley and I'm 29 years old. My husband Brian is also 29. We met in high school and have been together ever since. Brian was the typical golden boy, smart, good at sports, everything you could think of. I was the quiet, nerdy type. Despite our differences, we started dating in high school and have been married for about 3 years now. Brian works a regular 9-to-5 job, Monday to Friday. That pays really well. I, on the other hand, work as a sales rep. My job doesn't pay very well, but Brian takes care of everything in the house, so I work to pass the time since I don't have many friends. We don't have kids yet, but we're planning on having some in our 30s. Our first date was a mix of nerves and excitement. Brian had planned everything meticulously, from the restaurant to the movie we would watch afterward. He picked me up from my house, and I remember feeling butterflies in my stomach as I got into his car. We went to a cozy Italian restaurant downtown. The atmosphere was romantic, with dim lighting and soft music playing in the background. Brian was the perfect gentleman, pulling out my chair and ordering for us both. We talked for hours, getting to know each other better and sharing stories about our lives. After dinner, we went to see a movie. I can't even remember the name of the film now, but I do remember how comfortable I felt sitting next to Brian, our hands almost touching in the armrest. It was a simple date, but it was perfect in every way. Our second date was a bit more adventurous. Brian surprised me by taking me to a local amusement park. I was thrilled because I loved roller coasters and all the fun rides. We spent the day going on different rides, laughing and enjoying each other's company. Brian even won me a stuffed animal at one of the game booths, which made me feel like a teenager again. After the amusement park, we went for a picnic in the park. Brian had packed a delicious lunch and we sat on a blanket under a tree, talking and enjoying the beautiful day. It was on that second date that I knew Brian was someone special. He was caring, thoughtful, and made me feel like the most important person in the world. I honestly couldn't wait to see where our relationship would go. For our third date, Brian planned a romantic evening at a rooftop restaurant in the city. The view was breathtaking, with the city skyline lit up against the night sky. We enjoyed a delicious dinner, savoring each bite and soaking in the ambiance. Brian was attentive and charming, making me feel like I was in a fairy tale. After dinner, we took a stroll along the riverbank, hand in hand. The city lights reflected off the water, creating a magical atmosphere. Brian stopped at a bridge, and under the starry sky, he told me how much he cared about me and how he hoped our relationship would continue to grow. It was a perfect evening, and as we walked back to the car, I couldn't help but feel grateful to have Brian in my life. He was not just my boyfriend, but also my best friend. For our fourth date, Brian surprised me with a weekend getaway to a cozy cabin in the mountains. It was a picturesque setting surrounded by tall trees and the sound of a nearby river. The cabin was charming, with a rustic fireplace and a cozy bed. Brian had thought of everything, from the bottle of wine waiting for us to the firewood stacked by the fireplace. We spent the weekend hiking in the mountains, exploring the nearby trails, and enjoying each other's company. Brian was attentive and caring, always making sure I was comfortable and having a good time. One evening, we sat by the fire, roasting marshmallows and sharing our dreams for the future. It was during that weekend getaway that I realized how much I loved Brian and how I couldn't imagine my life without him. As we packed up to leave, I knew that this weekend would be one that I would always cherish. For our fifth date, Brian planned a fun day at the beach. We packed a picnic basket with sandwiches, fruits, and snacks and headed to the coast early in the morning. The day was perfect, with clear blue skies and the sound of the waves crashing against the shore. We spread out a blanket on the sand and enjoyed our picnic, watching the seagulls fly overhead. After lunch, we went for a swim in the ocean. The water was cool and refreshing, and we laughed and splashed around like kids. Brian even taught me how to build a sandcastle, and we spent hours creating intricate designs in the sand. As the sun began to set, we sat on the beach, watching the colors change in the sky. Brian put his arm around me, and we sat in comfortable silence, enjoying the moment. It was a simple day, but it was filled with love and laughter. I felt grateful to have Brian by my side, and I knew that I was falling more and more in love with him with each passing day. Brian and I continued to date throughout high school, and our relationship only grew stronger with time. My parents and siblings loved Brian. He was the only boyfriend I ever introduced to them that they liked instantly. Brian was charming and very friendly, and he fit right in with my family. As we approached the end of high school, we began to talk about our future together. We both wanted to go to college, but we were unsure of where life would take us. Despite the uncertainty, we were excited about the possibilities ahead. Graduation day was a bittersweet moment for us. We were sad to say goodbye to our high school years, but excited about the future. Brian was there by my side, holding my hand as we walked across the stage to receive our diplomas. After graduation, we celebrated with our families and friends, looking forward to the next chapter of our lives. College was just around the corner, and we were both eager to see where our relationship would take us in this new chapter. Brian and I were thrilled to find out that we had both been accepted into the same college. It was a dream come true for us, as we had always hoped to continue our education together. However, college life brought its own set of challenges. We were both focused on our studies and involved in various activities, which left little time for us to spend together. We had to juggle our academic responsibilities with our relationship, and it wasn't always easy. There were times when we would go days without seeing each other, and our phone calls became less frequent. We both knew that our education was important, but we also missed the closeness we had in high school. Despite the challenges, we made an effort to prioritize our relationship. We would schedule study dates and make time for each other whenever we could. It wasn't always perfect, but we were committed to making it work. Navigating through college years, however, made our relationship way stronger. We learned to communicate better and appreciate the time we had together. College was a challenging time for us, but it also brought us closer together and solidified our bond. After a few years of dating in college, Brian and I decided to take the next step in our relationship and move in together. It was a big decision, but we both felt ready to take that step. We found a cozy apartment near campus and spent weeks decorating and making it feel like home. It was exciting to imagine waking up next to each other every day and coming home to each other after classes. Living together brought us even closer. We shared chores, cooked meals together, and created a space that was truly ours. It was a new chapter in our relationship, and we were excited to see where it would take us. There were challenges, of course. We had to learn to compromise and communicate even more effectively. But overall, living together strengthened our bond and solidified our commitment to each other. Graduation day was a momentous occasion for Brian and me. We had worked hard for years, balancing our studies with our relationship, and it was finally paying off. When we walked across the stage to receive our diplomas, I felt a surge of pride and gratitude. I was proud of all that we had accomplished together and grateful to have Brian by my side throughout it all. After the ceremony, we celebrated with our families and friends and basked in the joy of our achievement. However, our celebration was soon overshadowed by the news that Brian had been offered a job at a prestigious company. Brian's job offer was a dream come true. The company offered him a well-paying job with great benefits, and he would be starting immediately after graduation. I was thrilled for him, but I also felt a twinge of sadness knowing that our lives were about to change. Brian's job would require him to move to a different city, and I wasn't sure what that meant for our relationship. We had always talked about our future together, but then it seemed like everything was up in the air. After Brian received the job offer from the prestigious company, our lives were thrown into a whirlwind of excitement and uncertainty. Brian wanted me to move with him for his job, and while I was thrilled at the idea of starting a new chapter together, I was also nervous about what the future held. One evening, as we were packing up our apartment, Brian surprised me with a romantic dinner. As we sat down to eat, he got down on one knee and pulled out a ring. He looked into my eyes and asked me to marry him, to join him on this new adventure. I was overcome with emotion. I had always known that Brian was the one I wanted to spend my life with, and his proposal was a dream come true. I said yes without hesitation, knowing that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Planning our wedding was both exciting and stressful. We wanted our day to be perfect, but there were so many decisions to make and details to coordinate. We started by choosing a date and a venue. We wanted a summer wedding, so we picked a date that was a few months away to give us enough time to plan. We found a beautiful outdoor venue with a garden and a gazebo, which was perfect for our intimate ceremony. Next, we had to decide on a theme and color scheme. We wanted something simple and elegant, so we chose a color palette of soft pastels and gold accents. We also decided on a rustic chic theme, with lots of greenery and natural elements. One of the biggest decisions we had to make was the guest list. We wanted to keep our wedding small and intimate, so we only invited our closest family and friends. It was tough to narrow down the list, but we wanted everyone who attended to feel truly special. As the day approached, the stress started to build. There were last-minute details to finalize, seating charts to create, and vendors to coordinate with. But through it all, Brian and I supported each other and kept our focus on the most important thing, which was our love for each other. Our wedding day was a dream come true. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and everything seemed to fall into place perfectly. I woke up early, filled with excitement and anticipation for the day ahead. As I got ready, I was surrounded and helped by my bridesmaids and my mother. I couldn't help but feel a sense of calm wash over me. I knew that today was the day I would marry the love of my life, and nothing else mattered. The ceremony was held in a beautiful garden with flowers blooming all around us. As I walked down the aisle towards Brian, I felt a rush of emotions: happiness, love, and gratitude. I couldn't believe that this day had finally arrived. The ceremony itself was short and sweet, filled with heartfelt vows and promises of forever. When Brian slipped the ring on my finger, I felt a surge of joy unlike anything I had ever experienced before. After the ceremony, we had a reception filled with love and laughter. Our family and friends toasted to our happiness and danced the night away. It was a celebration of love and unity, and I felt truly blessed to be surrounded by such wonderful people. When the night came to a close, Brian and I snuck away for a moment alone. We looked up at the stars and reflected on the day we had just shared. I knew in that moment that I was the luckiest woman in the world to be married to such an amazing man. Our wedding day was everything we had hoped for and more. It was a day filled with love, laughter, and unforgettable moments. I knew that all the planning had been worth it. 3 years had passed since our wedding day, and life with Brian was better than ever. Our relationship had only grown stronger with time, and I felt incredibly lucky to have him by my side. We had date night every week, and our sex life was amazing, better than I could have ever imagined. Brian was attentive, passionate, and always made sure that my needs were met. I felt desired and loved in a way that I had never experienced before. Brian's job was going great, and he was making really good money. His hard work and dedication had paid off, and I was so proud of everything he had accomplished. Brian was not just a loving husband, but also a caring and mature partner. He took care of everything, from the bills to the household chores, without ever complaining. His responsible nature made my life so much easier and allowed me to focus on other things. Whenever I was feeling down or stressed, Brian was always there to listen and offer support. He had a calming presence that helped me feel at ease, even during the most difficult times. His maturity and level-headedness were qualities that I admired and appreciated deeply. Brian's caring nature extended beyond just me. He was always willing to help out friends and family in need, and he never hesitated to lend a helping hand to anyone who needed it. His kindness and compassion were some of the things that drew me to him in the first place, and they were qualities that only grew stronger over time. Brian was not just my husband, but also my best friend and confidant. I knew that no matter what life threw at us, as long as we had each other, we could overcome anything. Well, that was until I fucked up, that is. One of the best things that also happened since we moved to this new city was that my sister and her husband decided to move here too. Having my sister close by was a godsend, especially since I didn't have many friends in the area. She was always there for me, ready to listen and offer support whenever I needed it. Having her here helped me feel less lonely and more connected to the city. As a sales rep, my job allowed me to be more social, which I enjoyed. I had to talk to people all day, which was great for me as I've not always been a people person and was looking to expand out of my comfort zone. Plus, since I wasn't the one paying the bills, I wasn't really stressed about money, so I could spend as much as I wanted on whatever I wanted. Then Theo came into the picture. He was charming and undeniably attractive. Sure, my husband was attractive too, very much so. And compared to me, a bland white woman, my husband was hot as hell. So seeing someone even hotter than my husband was surprising, to say the least. Everyone instantly liked Theo. He had a brilliant eye for everything: clothes, makeup, shoes. He could spot a fake from a mile away and could tell you what suited you and what would look horrible on you with just a glance. He was that good. I instantly took a liking to Theo too. Perhaps too much of a liking, I'd say. But I thought it wouldn't be a problem since I was just looking and not directly cheating. After all, I could look and admire. That didn't mean I would actually go out and cheat on my own husband. That was until Theo started to become especially nice to me. Theo was nice to everyone at the store, especially our customers, which made them like him a lot. But he started becoming extra nice to me, and I started to notice it subtly. From bringing me coffee to even bringing me food, complimenting what I wore, telling me I looked good or even that I looked hot, and just being overall very friendly to me. I thought it was just harmless flirting, but as time went on, I began to realize that there might be more to it than I initially thought. Theo continued to be extra nice to me, and I have to admit I liked it. It made some of the other girls in the store a bit jealous, which I found amusing. I didn't think much of it at the time. I didn't think it would go too far. After all, I was married, and Theo seemed like a decent guy. Plus, I was enjoying the attention. It felt good to be noticed and appreciated, especially since my husband was often busy with work and we didn't get to spend as much time together as I would have liked. I didn't see any harm in it, just harmless flirting, or so I thought. But looking back, I realized that I may have been naive. Theo's attention was flattering, but it was also a slippery slope. Theo continued to be extra nice to me, going out of his way to do things for me. He would bring me coffee in the mornings, remember my favorite snacks and bring them to work for me, and even offer to help me with tasks even when it wasn't part of his job. He was always there with a compliment or a kind word, and I have to admit it felt nice to be the center of someone's attention like that. Like I said before, I didn't think much of it. I enjoyed the special treatment and the attention, and it made me feel good about myself. But as time went on, I began to wonder if there was something more to Theo's actions. Was he just being friendly, or did he have ulterior motives? I couldn't deny that there was a part of me that enjoyed the attention, but I also knew that I was married and that I needed to be careful not to let things go too far. As Theo's attentiveness continued, I found myself becoming more curious about him. It was intriguing how he knew I was married, but was still so extra nice to me. There were single co-workers in the store who would go over the top just to get him to notice them, yet he seemed more interested in me. His actions made me wonder what it would be like to be single again. I couldn't deny that there was a part of me that was flattered by his attention and that found him attractive. If I were single, I would have probably dated Theo in a heartbeat, but I was married, and I knew that I needed to be careful not to let my curiosity get the best of me. One evening after work, ironically, I hadn't taken my car that day. It was one of our co-workers' birthdays, and we all decided to go out to celebrate. Theo and I were included in the group, along with a few other colleagues. We went to a bar downtown, and the atmosphere was lively. Music was playing, people were dancing, and the drinks were flowing. I found myself enjoying Theo's company more than usual. We talked and laughed, and he even bought me a drink. I felt a sense of excitement and liberation being out with him, away from the constraints of work and home. As the night went on, I began to let my guard down and allowed myself to flirt back with Theo, enjoying the attention and the thrill of the moment. As the night went on, we continued to bond and the drinks kept coming. Before I knew it, we were all very drunk. Somehow I ended up going back with Theo. I woke up the next morning in his room, horrified at what had happened. I wondered how Theo had even been sober enough to drive us to his house. I quickly gathered my things, got dressed, and left, feeling ashamed and guilty for what I had done. On my way home, I texted my sister and asked her to please cover for me and say I spent the night at her place if my husband asked. My sister agreed, but only after making me promise to tell her everything when I went to visit her. When I got home, my husband was waiting for me. I lied and told him that I had spent the night at my sister's place because I had been too drunk, and my co-workers called her to come pick me up. He seemed to buy my story, but I could tell that he was still suspicious. I felt guilty for lying to him, but I was too ashamed to tell him the truth. I called in sick for work that day, needing time to recuperate and sort out my thoughts. Despite my best efforts to relax, my mind was in turmoil. I received numerous calls and texts from Theo, but I didn't know what to say, so I just ignored them, hoping he would eventually give up trying to contact me. I spent that day in a haze of guilt and confusion, trying to make sense of what had happened and what it meant for my marriage if I told my husband. The next day at work, I tried my best to avoid Theo, but he seemed determined to talk to me. Finally, he confronted me, and I told him that last night was a mistake and that we should forget about it. He seemed a little disappointed, but agreed and apologized for any discomfort he had caused. I noticed that some of my co-workers were acting a bit strange around me, but I chalked it up to the events of the night at the bar 2 days ago. I was consumed with guilt, but I was too scared to tell my husband. I knew he didn't condone cheating under any circumstances, not even under the influence of alcohol. He would always say, "If you know you can't hold your alcohol, then drink in moderation." I was terrified of his reaction, and the thought of losing him over my mistake was unbearable. so I kept quiet, burying my guilt deep inside me. The next day at work, some of my female coworkers approached me. These were the same ones who had been jealous of the friendship between Theo and me. They told me they knew I had spent the night with Theo and insinuated that we had slept together. They asked me if I had told my husband about the affair. I tried to deny it and even lied, saying my husband already knew. However, they threatened to search for my husband on Facebook to confirm. I had to stop them and told them to mind their own business. They then lectured me about the wrongness of cheating and insisted I come clean to my husband. I was very annoyed by their nosiness and their smug attitude, but at that point I was thinking of coming clean. That same day I decided to visit my sister, partly because I needed advice and partly because she had been bugging me to come over so she could hear what had happened and why I had asked her to lie for me. When I got there, I came clean about everything. I told her I was drunk and didn't even know how I ended up going home with Theo. My sister was understanding but horrified. She advised me to come clean to my husband, saying he was a very understanding person and would likely forgive me. She was wrong, of course. I lived with the guilt for a few days, mulling over what my sister and coworkers had said. The weight of my actions was heavy on my conscience, and I knew I had to come clean to my husband. I sat Brian down, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew this was going to be one of the hardest conversations of my life. As I started to tell him about what happened with Theo, I could see the shock and hurt in his eyes. I couldn't hold back the tears as I confessed everything, how it started innocently but then escalated into a mistake I deeply regretted. I begged for his forgiveness, promising that it would never happen again. He asked for all the details, his voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't hold back my tears as I spilled out the whole ugly truth, every detail of that awful night with Theo. Brian listened in silence, his face a mask of emotions. When I finished, there was a heavy silence between us. He looked at me and I could see the hurt and anger in his eyes. Without saying a word, he stood up, grabbed his keys, and left the house. I was left alone with my thoughts and my overwhelming guilt. I had hurt the man I loved more than anything, and I wasn't even sure if our marriage could survive this betrayal. Hours passed before Brian returned. His eyes were red, but his expression was surprisingly calm. He sat down next to me and took my hands in his. He said he forgave me, but that rebuilding truth would take time. At first, things seemed to be getting better. We talked more, spent more time together, but soon I noticed changes in Brian. He became more secretive, spending hours on his phone, always with a distant look in his eyes. He started paying more attention to his appearance, hitting the gym more often, dressing sharper. He was already handsome, but now he looked even better, and it made me feel insecure and anxious. As time passed, Brian's behavior became more controlling. He started questioning my every move, accusing me of things I didn't do. He became obsessed with the idea that I was still in contact with Theo, despite my assurances that I had cut off all communication with him. One day, out of the blue, Brian told me to quit my job. He said he didn't like the fact that I was still working with Theo, even though I had told him repeatedly that I had no contact with him. I was shocked and protested, but he insisted, saying it was for the good of our relationship. I quit my job, thinking it would make Brian happy and bring us closer together. But instead, his behavior only got worse. He would constantly check my phone, my emails, even my social media accounts, looking for any sign that I was still in touch with Theo. He would twist my words, make me doubt my own memory, and constantly accuse me of lying. I felt trapped, suffocated by his constant scrutiny and distrust. I tried to talk to him, to make him understand that his behavior was hurting me, but he would just dismiss my concerns, telling me I was overreacting or imagining things. I mustered up the courage to suggest counseling to Brian, hoping it would be a step towards healing our marriage. Brian's reaction was not what I had hoped for. He scoffed and shook his head and dismissed the idea. I realized then that our marriage was in serious trouble, and I didn't know if we could repair the damage that had been done. The icing on the cake, however, was when Brian brought his boss to our weekly date night. His boss and I had never gotten along. There was always this underlying tension between us. She had tried to flirt with Brian in front of me before when I attended some of their company's dinners or parties. I always stood my ground and called her out when she was being inappropriate, and Brian supported me, so I was shocked to see her. And besides, who brings another woman out to date night with his wife? During the dinner, his boss kept flirting with Brian, and she ignored me completely. I tried to catch Brian's eye, hoping he would intervene, but he avoided looking at me. The situation became so uncomfortable that I had to excuse myself and leave early because I was literally on the verge of tears. When Brian came home later, I tried to talk to him about how I felt, but he dismissed my concerns, saying his boss had overheard him talk about our date night and then insisted on coming and that I was overreacting. I felt so frustrated and hurt, I decided to seek advice on Reddit about how to navigate the situation and work on my marriage. Update. Hey everyone, I'm sure you remember me as the one who came seeking advice after messing up by cheating on my husband, and then him bringing his boss to our date night. It's been a roller coaster couple of months, and many of you have been asking for an update, so here it is. Since that incident, things have been pretty tough. I confronted my husband about all his gaslighting. I told him how his behavior was making me feel and suggested couples counseling. He was hesitant at first, but after some persuasion, he agreed to give it a try. In counseling, we both confronted our feelings. I apologized profusely for my actions and expressed my remorse. We tried to unravel the tangled mess of emotions that had built up between us. I hoped we could find a way back to each other, but Brian's heart just couldn't let go of the pain my betrayal had caused. He admitted that he had tried to forgive me, but the hurt ran too deep. It was devastating to hear, but I knew I had to respect his feelings. It was clear that our marriage had reached its breaking point. Brian said he had tried, but he just couldn't. I was devastated. I had hoped that counseling would help us work through our issues, but it seemed like it only made things worse. I was hurt and confused about what to do next. I loved my husband, but I realized I needed to let him go. Despite my efforts, he told me we were getting a divorce and asked me to pack up my stuff and leave. Feeling devastated, I agreed. I packed up my belongings, I cried so much they were literally non-ending tears streaming down my face, LOL, and left our home. I cried a lot and had to go stay with my sister for support. It was a difficult time for me, but I knew it was the right decision for both of us. I hoped that with time, we could both heal and move on from the pain. Brian said he'd send divorce papers once they were ready, and I knew it was the right choice. The pain of ending our marriage still lingered, of course, but I just had to let go. I packed the last of my things into an Uber because Brian wouldn't let me take the car he bought me. I had to go stay at my sister's place, and I'm so grateful for her unwavering support. The aftermath of the whole thing was challenging. Brian had outed me to my parents that I cheated, my parents called. Their voices were filled with so much shock and disappointment. They couldn't understand how I had let things get to this point. My in-laws were even harsher, blaming me for everything that had gone wrong. It was a very lonely and painful time, made worse by the judgment of those I cared about. It felt like everyone saw me as the bad guy. Brian made himself out to be the forgiving husband who tried to make things work. He had spun a tale of forgiveness and understanding, and painted himself as the saintly husband who had tried to forgive his wayward wife but couldn't. I was labeled the cheater who ruined everything, the one who had broken our marriage vows and shattered our life together. To add to the pain, Brian emptied our joint savings account. I confronted him about it, but he argued and reminded me that he had always been the primary breadwinner, earning significantly more than I did. It was true that Brian earned almost 10 times what I did and was more financially savvy, but it still stung to see all our savings disappear in an instant. I couldn't argue with his logic, though, and reluctantly let him have the money. I felt so lost and alone, I turned to my sister for support. She reminded me that my value wasn't tied to my marriage or my mistakes. My sister was my rock. She listened without judgment, offering me a safe space to grieve and heal. I knew I had made mistakes, but I was determined to learn from them and move forward. With my sister by my side, I began the slow process of rebuilding my life, hoping to emerge stronger and wiser than before. Also, since Brian made me quit my job, I was also in a bit of a strange place, jobless and facing an uncertain future. Surprisingly, I didn't mind too much. In truth, I had already been considering leaving. The thought of facing my co-workers after everything that had happened was daunting. I could imagine the whispers and the judgmental stares, and I knew I didn't want to deal with that. Since then, I've been applying for other jobs, hoping to find something new and start fresh. But so far, nothing has come through. It's been frustrating, but I'm trying to stay positive. I know that the right opportunity will come along eventually. For now, I'm focusing on healing and rebuilding my life. Thank you all for your support and advice. It's been a challenging journey, but I'm hopeful that we can overcome this together. Thank you all for listening.